So it's been 2 years since Nate made a video talking about Xbox Game Pass coming to the Switch in some capacity. In that video, he also talked about Ori coming to the Switch, and we also know that we had Cuphead come to the Switch as well from Microsoft. And I wanted to have Nate back on the channel here today to talk about the possibility of Game Pass coming to the Switch. It's been 2 years and a lot of things have changed. So Nate, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. It's a good topic to revisit after a couple of years because Microsoft is certainly a more aggressive company now, and we know they want Game Pass on every platform possible. So this will be a fun discussion.
Yes, so we have a lot to go over here today, but first, I do a message from our sponsor. Today's video is sponsored by Aspyr and their newest game, Star Wars Republic Commando. This was such a hidden gem on the original Xbox when it released back in 2005, giving us a different perspective of the Star Wars universe. In Republic Commando, you lead Delta Squad as you work together to infiltrate and dominate your enemies. I really enjoyed the tactical combat as you would work to order and lead the different members based on certain situations and missions. It makes the game feel more thought out rather than a standard run and gun shooter. Right now, Star Wars Republic Commando is available for $14.99 on the PlayStation 4 and Nintendo Switch, and you can click the link in my description below to check out Star Wars Republic Commando. I was really happy to see Star Wars Republic Commando get another chance now with gamers after it was overlooked on the Xbox so many years ago. Click the link in my description below to check out Star Wars Republic Commando, and thanks again to Aspyr for sponsoring today's video. Okay, so in 2019, Nate made that video after there were talks, apparently, of Nintendo and Microsoft getting together and having Game Pass go to the Switch in some way. That's right, Nate? Can you kind of catch us back up on that video? Because it has been a while. Think about 2019 when this video was posted. That was before the last big E3 that we had. And in that E3, we had like Hero, I believe, announced for the Switch. We had Fire Emblem going on, a lot of things. It feels like it was like a lifetime ago. But why don't you catch everyone back up on the initial report then?
Yeah, back in February of 2019, when I put out that report, a lot of it was actually fueled because I thought it was going to leak a lot earlier. We had seen some leaks from GDC profiles suggesting that Microsoft was going to host a panel about bringing Xbox Live to the Nintendo Switch. And when I saw that panel information come out, I thought to myself, I should report on this Game Pass initiative and how Microsoft is planning to bring titles like Ori to Switch. And it was a struggle because it was good information, but at the same time, it was just, that hesitation. What if this is just preliminary planning? What if discussions haven't been finalized? But I chose to run it because I did think another outlet was going to do it if I didn't. So I put out the story that Microsoft was planning or had plans to bring Game Pass to Switch. It would also utilize xCloud, which was still in a beta phase back in 2019. It wasn't on mobile platforms yet, and that some first-party publishing would be going on with titles like Ori and the Blind Forest. Now, Ori did come out. It was announced in September of 2019, and immediately after I put the report out, you had several other outlets come out to corroborate the information. Those outlets were Game Informer, Windows Central, and Jokes Video. So that gave me confidence that the information was accurate. Jokes Video went the extra mile. They listed even more software that Microsoft had intent or were planning to bring to the platform. And as you mentioned, that outlet also noted Cuphead. They mentioned Hellblade, but they also mentioned other bigger Microsoft IPs like Forza, Gears of War, and all this information at the time, it was credible. And I believe it still is credible.
Okay, so a partnership between Nintendo and Microsoft for Game Pass, which I assume would be a curated Game Pass, going to the Switch. Now, there were also apparently talks between Microsoft and Sony, but those fell through, and I really don't know why Sony would kind of, I guess, give a hand to Microsoft and help them up necessarily. We figure Sony's like, well, we don't really need to do this. There's no reason to bring Game Pass to the PlayStation now because they're the market leader. So obviously they would probably just decline that. But Nintendo, I think, actually has some incentive even to bring Game Pass to the Switch if it can offer Microsoft first party titles specifically, not necessarily all of the third-party titles that could exist on the Switch in some capacity. But if we're just talking like Halo, Gears of War, and Forza, you know what? I think there's a future there for that if Nintendo and Microsoft can work out the financial side of things.
Yeah, it's definitely a deal that would benefit both companies. The Switch is huge in Japan, so this would give Microsoft a better footing in that region because you offer Game Pass on Switch in Japan, you immediately gain access to a base of 19 million people. For the Western markets, the Switch would now be able to host games like Halo, Gears of War. Any Microsoft published first party project could now come to the Switch. And it would probably be a case of software that couldn't run natively on the hardware itself, which is why we saw Ori come over with a physical and digital release, because that was something that they could get running on the Switch hardware. But more demanding games like, we'll say, Gears of War 5, that's simply impossible to get on the Switch itself. So you would lean to xCloud to bring it to the platform. And it's a really compelling experiment for both of these companies. Microsoft now reaches a large base. They get their IPs on Nintendo's fan base and is able to reach a new audience. Meanwhile, Nintendo is able to cater to that more adult demographic that we typically see on Sony and Microsoft platforms. So what we've seen in Microsoft in recent years is they've expanded Game Pass and xCloud to phones, mobile devices, computers, laptops, and that type of initiative because they want to expand the reach of this platform as vast and as far as they can. Sony was definitely a company worth reaching out to. It probably never had a chance to go anywhere, but why not explore the idea? Nintendo is just the perfect partner for this type of initiative.
Yeah,
They want those types of games, and Microsoft makes them.
it sounded weird at the time back then, early 2019. I mean, we were just out of the holiday season for 2018, and the Switch is, it's cruising along. But now we kind of look over the last 2 years, and things have shifted quite a bit. At the time, Microsoft had already talked about first-party titles going to Game Pass, but now things are way different with Game Pass in just the last 2 years. It does appear that Microsoft is, just dumping tons of capital into this service. And they bought Bethesda and ZeniMax. That's a massive acquisition that's clearly designed and thought of to basically hold up Game Pass with several releases because they have to continue releasing game after game after game for a subscription service like this. That was $7.5 billion right there. We also naturally from Microsoft see them trying to, as you say, put it everywhere they can. So they've made partnerships with Samsung for phones to try to get it on that pre-installed. And we've also heard talks of them doing extra additional development to make it possible for xCloud to work on a cell phone, for iPhones, I'm sorry. So looking at all of this, and then we see Nintendo on the other side being more open to streaming with Hitman and Control, both being streamed games outside of Japan even. It does kind of look like both companies have been progressing quite a bit since 2019, possibly towards this Game Pass curated app on the Switch as like a future possibility.
Yeah, when you look at both companies from 2019 to now, they're very different. Back in 2019, we were still looking at the Microsoft that was trying to build Game Pass up to a service that people would want to subscribe to. We were still in the Xbox One generation where people thought Game Pass was Microsoft basically panicking, saying we have to find a means for revenue. Now when we look at Game Pass from the Series X generation of Microsoft, Game Pass is viewed as consumer friendly. It is an amazing value. And we can tell that Microsoft's shift from wanting to sell you a box like Xbox One to wanting to sell a service is more clear. So the idea of bringing Game Pass to the Switch or a Nintendo platform makes a lot more sense in 2021 than maybe it did in 2019 when we look back at it.
Yep.
And Nintendo, this is a company that's always been reluctant to let new types of technology on their platform. But as you mentioned, they have embraced streaming to a certain extent. We have third-party games that cannot run natively on the hardware, like Hitman 3, or even Control, but they're coming to the Switch because they are utilizing the streaming service that Nintendo has, embraced. They want these type of services on their platform so they can get software that they would otherwise be missing out on, and publishers are using it because they don't want to sacrifice and miss out on that Switch user base. So that's where you look at Game Pass and xCloud and say, this is a match made in heaven for Microsoft and Nintendo to come to a deal.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, really, it's just more options for people who own a Switch then, because you could just bypass Game Pass and say, I don't really want to do it. But if you already are a Game Pass subscriber and you just happen to have your Switch with you and you're like, you know what, I'll go ahead and stream it now. That's kind of the argument I've made with xCloud versus Stadia, is that xCloud just kind of comes with your Game Pass subscription and it's there, whereas Stadia was like the primary way and platform when it comes to playing these different games. But the thing now with Microsoft is they are so much more aggressive with Game Pass than they were 2 years ago, to the point where not only are they dumping capital all over the place, but they also appear to be kind of bending over backwards almost at times to make the service more and more appealing, whether it's through these game releases or even this latest rumor now, apparently them trying to court Kojima and work to publish his next game on Xbox and Game Pass through PC and all that. I assume that's part of the deal that they might be trying to work out. And they went around Sony to MLB to get MLB The Show 21, which Sony is developing on the Game Pass day one. We just had Outriders go to Game Pass day one. There are talks, all right, just right now, talks, rumors about even bigger deals coming to Game Pass through third parties. We were on the Spawncast the other week, and we were talking about what if they did Resident Evil Village as a Game Pass day one, just as an example. And I really think at this time, people are looking at Game Pass and say, well, anything's possible right now.
Yeah, you can't shut the door on any possibility when it comes to Game Pass. Microsoft is making a lot of behind-the-scene deals right now. They have several announcements still to come this year for Game Pass day one releases, and some of them will surprise people. Microsoft is being very aggressive with this platform. They want to sell this service, and they are exploring all avenues to make it possible. So people should really be applauding the efforts that Microsoft is going. And I've said this before, but Microsoft, they are playing catch up. Mm-hmm. Sony is the market leader, so Microsoft has to be more aggressive. They're trying new things, and this is a really entertaining thing to watch for us as onlookers. Microsoft is an exciting company right now. We continue to see them evolve and push new agendas, and they're succeeding in many ways with the new initiatives that they're putting forward. And even last year when Game Pass would come up, I'd say repeatedly, Microsoft is taking a gamble focusing on Game Pass when it came to launching the Series X and Series S. If it paid off, they would look like geniuses. And we're very early in this generation, but Microsoft is looking incredibly intelligent right now, using Game Pass as that means of pushing their platform forward. Because, as you mentioned, Outriders, the possibility of something like Resident Evil 8, MLB The Show, Microsoft is really creating a haven for gamers, and they're making that subscription service look highly appealing. At this point, how can you look at Game Pass and say it doesn't have something that appeals to you?
You know, I realized the other day, because we've had several games now come out through April, and I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, you know what? I didn't have to necessarily buy Outriders up front, because I had Game Pass. I didn't have to buy Soulstorm because I have PlayStation Plus. I'm not going to have to buy MLB The Show 21 because I have Game Pass. And I'm thinking, wow, this battle the subscription services right now to get some of these third-party games day one. I mean, even like Destruction All-Stars, I have to buy that up front. I'm actually kind of enjoying the money that's being saved right now because of this. So I hope Microsoft continues to get more and more aggressive. And if part of being aggressive would mean that they give Nintendo a pretty good deal overall to get Game Pass onto the Switch, I'm all for it. Just another platform to put on there that has physical buttons, because we had mentioned before we went on here in this video that I tried the touch controls for xCloud on the phone, and they're less than ideal because they're all over the screen. And I'm not a big fan of the attachments that you get for your phone, because if someone calls you in the middle of it, it's like a whole I like the idea of having a dedicated handheld device that I can use for xCloud, essentially, or Game Pass. And I'm looking at the Switch, and it's like, it makes a lot of sense to do that. So yes, I would love to see Microsoft take a shot at getting Nintendo on board once again, and maybe they go back to the table and revisit the talks that they had previously, because, I mean, we can only assume that they broke down in some way since it's been 2 years now.
Yeah, I imagine they'd broken down, likely due to financial reasons. They probably couldn't negotiate a payment plan that they both would agree on, because as we know, if you sell a microtransaction or a digital game on a platform, the console holder typically gets 30% of that sale. So with Game Pass, there could have been a lot of, discrepancy into how was revenue split going to be shared. If you were to subscribe to Game Pass on the Switch, would Nintendo take 30% of your monthly subscription fee? Would they only get 30% if you signed up with that $1 for 3 month type deal? Would they get 30% of any microtransactions that were purchased on the Switch itself? It was probably a type of deal there that could have caused the breakdown, because that's a logistical nightmare of really setting up a pay rate. At the same time, I guess Microsoft could come forward and say, we'll give you an annual rate of this much to have it on the service, but that's something they would have had to negotiate, and that's definitely a factor that easily could have broken down negotiations.
Right. Yeah. And that's kind of what I was thinking with some of these pitfalls, like what could keep the service from the Switch. And one of those, I guess, would be that there's the overall financials, figuring out a deal there. And I also considered the idea of it being a curated list. Like, I'm sure Microsoft wants to just be like, everything is on there, but they deal with this curated list with PC, as well as we see with touch controls and mobile. So they're still trying to figure all of that out. And I guess it would be technically more work for Microsoft to curate a list specifically for the Switch as well. But I was also considering Nintendo might have some concerns around xCloud existing on the Switch, because it could keep people from buying games on their platform just because there's an option where they just get to stream games rather than have to go and buy it necessarily on Nintendo's eShop. Not the same game necessarily, but let's say Microsoft, they come out with Psychonauts 2 and, I guess I'll just play this brand new game rather than go buy, say new Super Mario Bros. U or something on the eShop, because I'm getting my platforming fix here.
Yeah, that's definitely something that Nintendo would have considered in any talks to bring Game Pass to the platform, is that if the curated lists did bring a fairly consistent flow of high quality software to it, Nintendo would look at it and say, is this taking away from our potential sales of our own software? And we know Nintendo, they view it as you buy a Switch or you buy a Nintendo hardware to buy our games. Yes, we try to make it welcoming to third parties, but ultimately, when we put out a brand new Mario game or like Pokemon Snap, they kind of don't have a big release around it because they want that game to sell well for, as long as possible. They like to give these games breathing room. So now with Game Pass, there is that potential that if Microsoft says we're bringing MLB The Show to the Switch curated Game Pass list, this would be 10 days before Pokemon Snap. Now, could that potentially impact the sales of that game? Maybe. It's impossible to gauge, because I would assume that the audience is two different demographic.
That makes sense. Sure.
People who want to take pictures of Pokemon likely don't want to play Home Run Derby with Aaron Judge, but there is a potential overlap, and you might say, hey, I'm going to dedicate all my time to this brand new big baseball release. I'm going to pick up Pokemon Snap further down the line.
Yeah.
Nintendo wants you to buy Pokemon Snap because they get all that money.
Right. But like, let's say there's one that's maybe a little closer in genre. Like, let's say a new Halo game releases in the same week as Metroid Prime 4. Something like that. Just as an example, right? 5 years from now for Metroid Prime 4. Just as an example. So that's something I was thinking about. I was like, that might be a hang up for Nintendo with the idea of Game Pass as an application that's curated heading to the Switch. But the other thing, Nate, we got to consider here is, Phil Spencer had a Switch on the back shelf in his live stream. And we now know that Kojima Productions mascot might have actually meant something, because he's apparently in talks with Kojima for publishing a game through Xbox and Game Pass. And Kojima with freedom is a dangerous thing. We've seen it, right? It gets out of hand. But we did get Death Stranding, and whether people liked it or not, it was a quality game overall when you look at it. Mm-hmm. So I am kind of like, wait a minute, that Switch was right next to that Kojima mascot. Was that a red herring, or are there actual talks with Nintendo? So maybe that's what we'll finish with here, Nate. Do you think in the next year, basically, let's go with the next year, all right? Do you think there will be any mention of Game Pass on the Switch? It doesn't necessarily have to come out, because it takes Microsoft some time to roll this stuff out. Do you think there's mention, an announcement, something Game Pass related on the Switch in the next 12 months, that going until the end of this fiscal year for Nintendo then?
Man, if we look at the shelf as a true indication of a potential hint, then yes, something is up with Microsoft and Nintendo because Phil Spencer likes to toy with us with his background shelf objects. So it would suggest that Microsoft and Nintendo are up to something, and Game Pass is the only thing that would make sense. They've already published games on the Switch before with Ori, so why tease something like that? Game Pass, we know is their focus. We know it's something that they have communicated with Nintendo to bring to the platform in the past. So I'd say there is a realistic chance within the next 12 months we hear of some sort of initiative to bring Game Pass to Switch.
What about Master Chief and Smash? Could that be why the Switch is there?
That could also be another reason. I mean, we have two Smash Brother characters left.
Yeah, I mean, you got to end it with something big, right? But now, I think you're onto something. That I do think there is an actual possibility of Game Pass heading to the Switch. I think it's more likely than people are thinking right now. Even it seems weird to consider this, but I mean, think about it this way: you have to sign into Xbox Live to use Minecraft on the Switch. So,
right.
Like, you're already technically doing something using Microsoft's service on the Switch now. So.
Yeah, and I really think if people break it down and you just view it from the point of Microsoft, all the benefits you would gain by having that Switch base allow Game Pass on it, it's a win for Microsoft and it's a win for Nintendo because you're going to get software that otherwise you would not have. And if we just view it as Microsoft published games, imagine having Starfield.
Oh, yeah, Switch. Good point. Elder Scrolls 6.
Elder Scrolls 6, Fable,
Forza Horizon.
Dark.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, Sony is the outsider. Nintendo is able to get these games via xCloud and Game Pass. Microsoft is making money. It's a win for both of those parties. So it's definitely an initiative. If I'm Microsoft, I'm going to push hard. And if I'm Nintendo, I just have to weigh those pros and cons. And I would definitely say the pros are going to outweigh the cons in this list.
Wow, the Switch would quickly become one of like the best systems to buy at that point. Yes, it's still technically over streaming, but xCloud will continue to evolve over time. And you could get to a point where you could have all of the Nintendo first-party games locally, but then also have the option to play all of these Microsoft first-party games that, I mean, it's going to take a while for them to spin all of this up and get to a point where they're just basically putting out game after game after game. But that would be quite the system to have on the go with you, even, especially if we get to next generation for the Switch and maybe they incorporate mobile towers and they get into like 5G or something there. Always a possibility. But it sounds like there would be an interesting future between Microsoft and Nintendo there if we get to that point. So, I think this next fiscal year, either way for Nintendo is going to be very interesting. I think it's going to be very interesting for Microsoft as well. It just comes down to if their paths end up crossing with Game Pass on the Switch. Nate, you want to let everyone know where they can find you?
Me on YouTube at Nate the Hate. We have a weekly podcast where me and Modern Vintage Gamer deep dive numerous topics of current events in the gaming industry. And they can find me on Twitter at Nate the Hate, followed by the number 2, or on Twitter at DirectFeedGames.
Okay. Thanks, everyone, for joining us today. And thanks to Aspire once again for sponsoring today's video. And we'll see you guys next time.